This is Unit 3 and it's called Analytic Geometry. And our goals for this unit are to create a table of values in order to graph and or determine if a relationship is linear, determine a slope, calculate missing information for linear relationships, and write and graph linear functions. All right, so today specifically what we're working on is I can graph using a table of values. Now, before we actually get into the actual graphing, let's take a look at this item here. And this is called the Cartesian plane. Now, you've seen the Cartesian plane before. And the Cartesian plane has a few different things that are important for us to understand. It's like a number line that goes both horizontally and vertically, and they intersect at a location at 90 degrees. And so it's like a number line in both places. Now, when we're doing this, a couple different things that we want to be interested in. Because we have divided the sheet into 4 things, we call something that's a 4 a quad standing for 4. So when we look here, we have a quadrant 1, we have a quadrant 2, obviously a quadrant 3, and a quadrant 4. Okay, and our vertical and horizontal lines, we call them axes. We have a y-axis and an x-axis. Okay, so it's really important that when we're graphing that we literally do put x, y. Now, when we're talking about quadrants, I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. However, they've used Roman numerals for that. So if you don't know Roman numerals, I guess you'll know a few of them by the time we're finished here. Now, a few other things that we want to be talking about has to do with where they intersect. You can see that I have a red line, and this actually is, and I'll bring up my eraser, this actually is called the origin. So it's the beginning, origin meaning beginning. So it's where the two axes intersect. And if you notice, it has what we call a coordinate 0, 0. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about ordered pairs. Now, and that's because that's a pair meaning 2. Now, if I look also underneath these, I have positive, positive, negative, positive at the top here. If I look at quadrant 1, what they're saying is in quadrant 1 is that the x-axis is positive and the y-axis are positive numbers. So that's why we have positive, positive. In quadrant 2, we can see that this axis is negative, okay, and that axis is there, the x-axis, and the y-axis is positive. And if we follow the same thing, what we should have down in quadrant 3, we should have negative and negative. And let's find out if that's what we do have. Yes, we do, negative and negative. And finally, the last quadrant, we have our x's are positive and our y's are negative. So that is the Cartesian plane, okay? And we're going to be working with the Cartesian plane pretty well for this whole unit. So let's actually talk a little bit more about ordered pairs. Now, ordered pairs, what they are is they describe points on that plane. So when we graph them, it describes them. And the way it describes it, it uses the form P bracket X comma Y. So what that means is, first of all, that A names the point. Sorry, that P names the point. Okay, so if I put P and then a bracket, it means that I'm talking about point P. The X tells me whether I'm moving left or right, and the Y tells me if I'm moving up or down. Okay, so let's actually go and try to graph some of these items together. So first of all, it says graph the following. The first point is A, which is 7, 2. So that is our X, and that is our Y. So I go along my x-axis till I get to the number 7, and then I go up 2. So remember, the first number tells me if I'm left or right. Because it's a positive 7, I'm going to the right. And because it's a positive 2, I'm going up. So my point A is located right here, and so I'm putting the point A. Point B is -4, -6. So again, left to right first, so -4, and then down to -6. So that's where my next point is located, and that's point B. And then if I look at point C is located at -8, +1. So left to right, first of all, -8, and then at +1. So there's our point C. And our last point to do is 2, -6. So again, I'm going to go right 2 and down 6. So that's where my last point is located, point D. Now, the next thing we need to look at has to do with completing T-charts. T-charts, another word for that is table of values or T-table. You probably call them T-tables in elementary school. And what it does, it gives us points to graph on that Cartesian plane. Now you can see what we have here is we have a T-table. Okay, T-table. I have X's and I have Y's. And luckily here, they have given me some numbers. Okay, now if they didn't give them to me, I have to come up with them myself. And obviously I'm going to choose different ones. And I have an equation. Okay, so this equation, I'm going to put in numbers for X, calculate it, and out will come my value for Y. So the steps involved here are choose X's if needed. In this case, it's not needed. Then substitute the X numbers into the equation and solve for Y. So if I have, we'll do a few of these together, and I'm just going to actually hide this again so you can always open it up if you need to see it again. Okay, so for this location here, y is going to equal 3, and where there is an x in the equation, I'm going to put my x value. So it's like a mini little formula. So 3 times 0 is 0 plus 2, so my answer is 2. So what this tells me is that when x is 0, y is 2. So it actually gave me an ordered pair. So let's try the next one. The next one would be 3, and it would be times 1 plus 2. So we know that's 5. My next point would be 3 times 2 plus 2. So we have 8, and then I have 3 times 3 plus 2, and I end up with 11. Okay, so what I've gained here is I've created a table of values, a T-table, a T-chart, and what has given me, it has given me a set of ordered pairs. So I have an X, I figured out the Y, and now I could actually go and graph those points, which we will do eventually. Okay, so let's try another example of that. Okay, you notice they can give us tons of different equations and we're capable of doing them. Again, they've given us values, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Again, if you have to choose, obviously you're going to choose low numbers. You don't get bonus marks for using high numbers, not at all. So in order to find what y equals, I would do -2 times 0 plus 5, and so I would end up with 5. Again, the next one would be -2 times 1 plus 5. So this time I would have a 3. And then the next time I do the same thing, I would have -2 times 2 times 2 plus 5. So I would have a +1. That was actually a plus, didn't look like it. And my final point would be -2 times 3 plus 5. Okay, now what I'm showing you is I'm showing you the work to the side here. Okay, this work here. This work here, you might not need to write it down. Okay, if you can calculate it in your head, that's fine, but that's literally what your head has to do. in order to do it. Okay. Now let's look at one more example. Now this one's a little bit different. And the reason it's different is because there is a third in it. So there's a fraction. So what I've done is I haven't chosen all of the x's. Obviously I chose 0 because multiplying by 0 works really, really well. And let's try that one first. So I'd have 1/3 times 0 plus 4. Well, obviously 1/3 times 0 is 0, and so I have a 4. Now notice what I've done for the next one. The next one, what I have done is I have chosen for my x the number 3. Now I chose it on purpose. And the reason I chose it on purpose is because 3 goes into 3. So 1/3 times 3 is 1, so this number here is 5. So if I have to choose, which I do in this case, I have to choose 2 more values to put in for x. The numbers I'm going to choose are multiples of whatever my denominator is. Now my denominator in this case is the number 3. So multiples of 3 would be 3, 6, 9, 12. So those are the types of numbers I'm going to choose. So the next number, obviously, I'm going to choose is 6 because 6 is a multiple of 3, and I'm then going to choose 9. So what happens is when I put it in here, I end up with 1/3 times 6 plus 4, and then I also have 1/3 times 9 plus 4. And if I calculate it, what I end up with are some nice numbers. So this here is going to create 2 plus 4, which is 6. The next one is going to be 9 divided by 3, which is 3, and plus 4 would be 7. So now I have completed my t-table. And what I've created with that t-table is I've created ordered pairs of 0, 4, 3, 5, 6, 6, 9, 7. Now there are infinite points, so I could have chosen any points I wanted for x, anything I wanted at all. I just decided to choose these ones. Now having said that, there's nothing wrong with me choosing other ones. Okay, I chose numbers that were easier to work with. Okay, so when I go to graph them, and as I said, that's what we'll be doing tomorrow, you'll see that it's done that way on purpose so that it's easier for you to graph. Okay, so what you have for mathematical pleasure tomorrow is a worksheet. Have fun.